All right, we've got everyone on, and we've got a few people on Zoom and a few of them on YouTube. We are also live right now already, and I will be recording it right about now. And hi, Malcolm. Hi, Tan. Very good morning to all of you guys. It's it's a cloudy day here. It's raining. If I do get disconnected, you guys just continue talking. I'll be right back on, and Fifi is here as backup just in case. But I don't think that would happen. That's just a backup. All right. We'll wait a few minutes more. Let me just set this up. Okay. Is there something happening at the back there? Okay. 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 Welcome back, everyone, to the Tuesday Talk Live by Place Borneo. My name is Mona, and I will be your host for today, your moderator. We've got a few good heads, a few very good speakers today with us, and I'm excited to explore the topic that we have. For those new one, the Tuesday Talk Live is a platform for us to share ideas, information and solutions, especially right now we're in an economic slowdown, I would say a recession, a pandemic, all balled into one. And solutions is there's a lot of solutions or ideas that we need to get us started on our recovery or just to change how we do business nowadays. And today's topic, we've got gig economy, the future of work. Now, the pandemic has forced us to do a lot of things differently. A lot of us had to do remote working from home. And some of us found that helpful, some of us did not. And another thing that the pandemic caused us to do was downsizing a lot of businesses. Business owners had to retrench staff or force on furloughs or unpaid leaves. And some people call it right sizing. That's just a politically correct term. And because of that, because of this right sizing or downsizing, whatever you want to call it, a lot of business owners are looking at alternatives to having a team of skilled workers or talents, but still keep your cost at an acceptable level, at least in the next year or two. And that's where the gig economy or getting freelancers or contract workers come into place. And that's the reason why a lot of companies actually do not know how to go into this gig economy. Now, that's from a business owner point of view. From an individual, some of you guys have been retrenched or lost your jobs or are already in the gig economy. You're a gig worker, a freelancer. So how do you thrive in this economy? How do you make it work best for you? And if you're new to this, today we've got a few experts talking about this. You can ask your questions. Before we start, what exactly is the gig economy? So if you're a musician, you're probably familiar with the word gig. You know, I've got a gig there, I've got a gig here, you know, I'm going to be done in 1 hour for that gig. So that's exactly it. I'm getting this from Marion's book. A gig is a job of uncertain duration or a short duration in any field, whether it's a driver, a freelance artist, or an interim CEO. So at any level that you're working, if it's for an uncertain duration, a short duration, you're a gig worker. And the gig economy refers to the companies and business systems that support this independent work. So that's all from Marion's book. And I'll talk about that a bit later. And that's the definition of gig economy. There's a few other things: on-demand economy, sharing economy. So these are all, well, it's overlapping with the gig economy. Now, our first speaker, Marion McGovern. I'm just gonna show this right here. Marion McGovern is the chair of the board of the Myers-Briggs Company, and she is the expert in the gig economy, on the gig economy. And she published her book in 2017 called Thriving in the Gig Economy: how to capitalize and compete in the new world of work. And the definition of the gig economy that I had just now was actually from this book. If you're going to gig economy as a business or as a worker, I think you should read this book. I just finished it. I've left a few hundred pages more, so I have to finish that. She founded M Squared Consulting and Collabras. M Squared is a specialty consulting firm and uses independent consulting talent, gig worker, to meet needs of clients and to solve their critical business problems. And Collabras, which is a subsidiary company of M Squared, is a professional employer of independent consultants while they are on engagement to ensure compliance with employment laws. Now, employment laws are something that actually affects a lot of gig workers, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that a bit later. Mr. Avin Coffert, the forester we have right here. He has a Master of Science in Forestry from the Royal Veterinary and Agricultural University in Denmark. And immediately after graduation, Mr. Coffert came in international consulting with the Forestry Department in Sarawak, right here in Malaysia. That's a long way from home, Mr. Coffert. And for more than 40 years, he has been in international consulting, mostly freelancing with organizations like the UN, the World Bank, the European Union, and a lot of other organizations. He has had projects in 23 different countries and about 40 or a few hundred different companies, I think. So he is the gig worker, if you want to look at one. And last but not least, we've got Miss Suraya Sazali, the research associate at the Khazanah Research Institute. Khazanah is they carry out research on pressing issues of the day in the nation, in Malaysia. And her current research actually focuses on quantitative and qualitative aspects of the labor force, focusing on the gig economy, the benefits for workers, the benefits for employers, and how we can make that work for both parties. So she's going to be able to give us some context or some local context on this gig economy, especially in Malaysia, and she's going to give us some statistics based on her research at the moment. All right, so as usual, we're going to start with about 3 minutes of maybe a summary or introduction of your key points or yourself. And then we'll go into discussion. Those on YouTube, just ask your question on the chat box. Those on Zoom, you have the Q&A option at the bottom, and we'll go, as we go along, we'll pick up a few questions and answer them. All right, so I'm gonna start with Marion. Go ahead.
I guess I'm so glad you started with the definition of the gig economy, because I think a lot of people think about the gig economy just as the on-demand side, just as the drivers and delivery people, and it is so much more diverse, as you pointed out. Thank you. But there is also a whole ecosystem there that is also so diverse. I mean, there are platforms for everything from scientists doing clinical trials to translators to chefs. So, I mean, there are snowplow drivers. There are platforms where you can find a snowplow driver. So technology has kind of taken what had been a very fragmented marketplace and added some efficiency to it. But it's only as efficient if people know how to access those talents. So that is one aspect, is one point that I really like to get across, is sort of the diversity of what's out there. For companies, I think the need to be agile and to be able to move quickly and pivot, the idea of bringing in independent professionals and independent gig workers is very powerful, because it really does add to that agility. And there are some key dimensions that they have to keep in mind relative to how do they best bring these people in and how do they best deploy them. For people that may be just considering it, there are 3 things that I think they have to know, which is, do you really have a marketable skill? 2, can you really be alone? And 3, can you say no? Because the truth of the matter is, when you have a client, you need to be able to say no to them. It's not like having an employer where you do whatever your employer says. So I'm not sure how my time's doing, so I'll turn it over to the person.
Okay. That's good. We'll go into that a bit. I think more in detail later on. Okay, Mr. Coffert, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I must admit, I had never heard about the gig economy until Mona called me just a few days ago. Or probably was sitting in my office and say, "Hey, can you talk about the gig economy?" I said, "Huh." Not knowing that I have been an active gig economy member for more than 40 years. We just call it freelance consultants, or we can call it so many other words. But you call it gig economy, that's also okay. But it is actually something that goes together with the globalization. Now, I'm looking at it from an international point of view, because as Mona said before, I've been learning geography the hard way. So it is about using the same labor force in over the borders. So in this globalization, and we have these things like the EU that talk a lot about the mobility of the workforce, meaning that the workforce should be able to move to where there is a need. That goes then a little bit, sometimes in parallel, but sometimes clashes with this terrible thing that many young people suffer from nowadays. They call it the FOMO, the fear of missing out, the fear of taking a long-term decision for their own life, because they're scared that tomorrow there will be something, a better option that they lose if they say yes to something today. That is sort of one of the backsides of the middle of those people who are constantly moving from one place to the other. You can see in the old days, when you think of your parents, their objective in life was to have one job from they came out of the school until they retired. Nowadays, if you have been in one job for 3 years, that's a long time, and you think it's time to move on. So there is an attitude that is changing there. You don't have the same kind of loyalty. So what you basically become if you go into freelancing or gig economy, that is you, as Marianne mentioned before, you are basically becoming a subcontractor or a contractor. You are becoming a one-man company with all the hardship that goes with being a company. Rules and regulations and all sorts of government interference in how you do. You have to suddenly organize taxes and GSTs and whatnots when you operate that in many different countries, a lot of time goes just figuring out the legal background for the place where you want to work. Now, as far as I can see, when we use the word gig economy, it is mostly an option for highly specialized people. But specialized people can also be at labor level, but there are people who can do things that are not in demand all the time. But the problem when you go into it is seen from the worker's point of view, the contractor's point of view, is very much about how to organize your economy. How do you finance the time between projects? It's okay if you're in a lucky situation where you have more or less permanent appointments to various projects. But now I'm not thinking just only on my own situation, but a lot of people that I meet in all these jobs I have been to. For most people, it is a problem that they only have jobs less than half the time. Meaning that when you hear about these nice fees that they charge, you have to divide it by 2 or 3, because that is the real income. So what to do in between? Are you going to file for unemployment? If you are registered as a company, you cannot. If you are completely hanging free and you say, I lost my job, and now then you can file for unemployment, but then they will also try to put you into a new job, and that might not be in the field that you want to be a freelancing person on.
Mm.
But even for the jobs, the money, the payments do not come easily. There will be a schedule, just like any contractor that makes a contract for building a house or whatever he's doing. He will be paid so much, if he's lucky, on signing the contract, and then so many percent at a certain time and so many percent at a different time. And when the whole thing is done, maybe long time after it's done, then you might get the last payment, and that can be quite an issue. I have just completed a job in Papua New Guinea. I did the job actually back in February, but it was only last week I was paid. Meaning I have to find, if I did not have, I have a gap filler job here in Malaysia, so I don't have that problem. But for most other people, they would have been sitting for half a year with no income.
Mm.
Has to be financed. And that is a result of that the contracts that we have to sign a contract each time. The contract is normally given to you as a take it or leave it thing from the employer or from your clients. And they are, as far as those contracts I've been given, they get worse and worse. I mean, they're all the same for all the different companies that I work for, but they are definitely not thinking of your situation.
Mm.
It is all about saving their own backside. There's nothing to save you in them. There's only all the things you are not allowed to do, all the things you must do, but there's nothing to save you. So, but that is for this kind of specialist like where I'm working. But where's the definition of the gig economy? Are the daily paid labor that stands every morning down in the port, hoping that there will be a ship that needs offloading? Is he just a daily paid labor, or is he part of the gig economy? He would like not to be part of the gig economy. He would like to have a job. Definitely his wife would like him to have a job, so she knows what to cook in the evening, or whether she should cook anything at all. The labor movement has, for the past 100 years, done anything they can to get rid of daily paid labor, to make it safe for laborers. And if we suddenly said that laborers should also be the mobile working force, then we are basically breaking down all the social safety nets that we have been building up for the past 100 years. And being from a very social democratic country, Denmark, then of course that is against anything I stand for. There are labor laws then in some countries that save these things. For instance, the labor law in Indonesia says that if you have had 2 consecutive time-limited or project-oriented employments, then the third one is automatically a permanent employment. Then you become an employee and not a contractor on the third one, whatever your contract says. So, and different countries have different similar laws that sort of try to make it safe for you. Now, if we then look at my special lesson in geography, being an international consultant, there are some issues that you really have to think of before you go into this one. I will not recommend everybody to take the life that I've had. A lot of people will say, hey, that's exciting. You have been seeing most of the world and all this kind of thing. Yeah, that has been exciting, but it has been at a cost. There's a total lack of security. You must bring your own security in any aspect. And basically your social life goes dead. now only because I have settled a bit in Malaysia, then I can start having some friends. But for 40 years, I would say I have had no friends because I have been constantly moving around. I have been establishing a home 20 different places since my graduation. Each time you lose friends. So you know a lot of people, but you have no friends. If you like a place, you cannot look for a new job in the same country. Most countries will not allow you to come in for one job and then look for another one. You must go out of the country. In some countries, you even have to stay away for 6 months or so before you can get another job with another company. If you are employed directly by them, there are other things if you go through overseas country.
All right.
Now, to get these jobs, and I'm sure many of our listeners, they think all these international consultants, how do I actually get them? It is very, very hard to get your first job because it's all about CV. We don't write applications. I don't think I have ever written the personal application for anything. You only send your CV. That's all. Because there are certain requirements, and if you are for the job, and if the CV does not show an experience in those things, tough luck. So it's not fair for the young ones, but fortunately, most projects also have non-competitive jobs, and that's where the young ones come in. Or you can start as a volunteer or something to build up your CV, but it's all about experience. The longer your CV, the better the chance for you to survive in this one.
Okay, Comfort, I'm going to stop you right there. I think you can go into the details of how to do a really good job at being a gig worker. I think at a later stage, I'll have to give the stage now to Suraya. Have her 3 minutes, and then we'll go back to Comfort and what you should do as a gig worker. Good points.
Okay, thank you so much, Mona. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, right. So, I had, first of all, thank you so much, Place of Borneo. I'm Suraya again. I'm from Khazanah Research Institute. We conduct research on pressing issue of the nations, and based on the findings, we bring it up to the government for policy considerations. So one of the pressing issues of the nation right now is definitely employment or thereof. I will actually unpack some of the unemployment rates in Malaysia, official data from the Department of Statistics, and then also like some of the survey findings on the impact of the pandemic itself on self-employed worker. Well, depending on the type of work that they do, whether they can be considered as gig workers or not. Hopefully, I'll be able to inject that kind of local context to the discussions. Before I start, I guess as a matter of practice, I have to say that whatever views I express on this platform may not necessarily match the views of Khazanah Research Institute. It's a practice thingy. So I guess later on through the discussion, I would like to, showcase some of the data available that might tell you what is the state of the employment landscape in Malaysia. And whether or not we can capture gig economy, we spoiler, we know the potential gig workers, but like in Malaysia, there is no authoritative statistic that these are the group of gig worker, which is problematic for policy making. But we have other indicators and other ways to measure, but obviously these are just estimates. Number two, then I guess for the listeners who are from Malaysia, whether you are thinking of becoming a gig worker or thinking of hiring gig workers, I would also, include some of the policy documents that coming out of like the government of Malaysia just to give a hint on where they are going in terms of directions, what are they thinking, and then what are the risks or against benefits of becoming and hiring gig workers. Like Mona mentions, I will also briefly touch on regulations. I'm not a legal expert, but then I also have contacts and also documents to see where Malaysia's like COVID, like the second presenter mentions about the legal background for different legal context for different country differs, at least for Malaysians, or Malaysian firms, I might be able to provide more insight into it. But again, yes, there are benefits for the economy. I will cite some number later. They provide you definitely easy access. Again, I understand for Marians, like gig economy and gig workers, they are like diverse group of people. They are not the same, they're not homogenous. We have like on-demand workers who, you know, arguably behave more like employees, and we also have like independent freelancers who have more independence, but you know, there are a lot of, you know, financial securities. And then I would like later on to cite some of the number about like financial literacy in Malaysia and the low take-up rate of like voluntary retirement schemes and self-employment retirement schemes. Maybe for those who are not familiar, in Malaysia's retirement schemes, we do actually offer scheme for self-employed, but the take-up rate is really low and quite disappointing. So for whoever listening, I would definitely encourage you to check it out, because Malaysia is considered as an aging society as of 2020, and will become an aged society in 2014. So these are like really important considerations at the bigger picture that, you know, maybe perhaps like individuals might not think, but actually very important in the long run, right? So I will stop there for now, and then I would definitely hope to share some of the numbers and then some of our key research findings later on.
Thanks, Soraya. And yeah, we've got a few really detailed input from Kofit as well. We'll go into that a bit later on. Right now, we'd just like to get Marian to give a big overview of the gig economy right now in the world. What does it look like right now? And perhaps are there new definitions that we should know about this gig economy?
Well, I can't say that I can speak to the entire world, especially during the pandemic, but I think probably the US is in the lead, if you will, in terms of the adoption of this strategy. Mm-hmm. And right now it's about 34% of the working population would be considered gig workers. And again, that's the broad definition. So that's Elvin, that's me. You know, I write books, I'm on boards, I consult. So that I'm a gig person. In fact, my publisher said if I could find a word that everyone liked, I'd make a fortune, because, you know, some people don't like to be called freelancers or contractors or consultants, yeah. But be that as it may. The primary, we also share the problem in the States of data. So because we don't collect data on this cohort. And there's a lot of noise in the numbers, but there are some groups that have time series data. So the challenge is understanding what they are counting in that. So for example, one of the data sets includes people that are selling things on eBay, which it could be a gig. You know, you could go around and decide to sell furniture or whatever it is, but it also could be a merchant in a traditional sense. So, so that one's very noisy. But at any rate, all of these various studies, as long as you understand the assumptions behind them so you can compare apples and oranges, have some great common themes. One of which is that there is, it's all about agency for the worker. The idea that they want to take control of what they do, for whom they do it, when they do it. And that is what is the driving force. I was interested in what Elvin said about the financial insecurity issues, which is certainly a big factor, one of the biggest factors that people have when they're surveyed as workers. But interestingly, the one study that has been done the longest since 2012, so there's now 7 years of data, they were asked if you were more financially secure as an employee than a contractor. When the study started in 2012, it was at 23%. Last year, it was at 50%. So 50% of people, half of the people that were working independently, felt that they had more financial security as an independent worker. And I think that part of that is just sort of the whims of companies laying people off. So the idea that at least I can have control, I can have more clients, I can do whatever I have to do. I also think another big trend in the States is using kind of the gig. I refer to it as a portfolio career, that, you know, you work for a company for a while, you go out and consult, you go back to a company, you gain new skills, you go out and consult. So you're sort of always doing this in and out dance. So again, the loyalty factor is gone, as pointed out, but there have been studies that show that the people who are doing independent work are doing more to build their own human capital. They're doing more to train themselves and build new skills. In fact, Upwork, one of the big platforms that is global, did a study where in the past, you know, time period, I want to say it was 6 months, 63% of the independent workers had done something to improve their skill set, and only 32% of employees had. So there is kind of a bias in the independent worker community of using this as a way to become even more marketable, because they're getting new skills. And in fact, for some of the junior folks, it is important your experience, but there is a kind of a bimodal distribution where, you know, right now millennials are the biggest cohort in America. I don't know about globally. They have overtaken the baby boomers. The baby boomers still earn more because they have more experience. But a lot of Gen Z, so the youngest cohort in the labor market, are using it to gain skills. So maybe that they're programmers at some tech firm, but they don't know Python. So they learn Python on their own. They go on a tech gig platform, get a Python gig, and because they get that Python gig, they can then transition to a better role either at their company or another company. So that I as someone who sort of started with a very senior level of consultants that I was helping to find engagements for, that was a model that was very surprising to me, but it appears to be something that is happening more and more.
That's very interesting, and to know that there's not much data, even in the US, and I think the US has the biggest number of gig worker, or it started mostly from there. I don't know, could be wrong, because of well, the economy of how things work. Well, at least in the European countries and in the US, in the Western Hemisphere. How about in Malaysia? Do you have any statistics on how many % of people consider themselves gig worker, or how the country consider them as gig workers?
Yeah, so that's the thing. So whenever I read like news articles or opinion piece that simply quoted like, oh, 26% of Malaysians are considered as gig workers, we have to double check on the numbers, because like based on Department of Statistics, we do not have that much of information to classify them as a gig workers. Like there's a lot of noise. We in Malaysia, we actually have stopped conducting time use survey because it's so expensive to conduct. So we cannot go back to that. And then there's another issue of Malaysia's where only aggregated data, we do have no access to data to, you know, cross-check or get into the nitty-gritty details of the statistics. Having said that, having said all that, one way that we can actually consider this kind of group to be a potential of gig worker, that would be own account workers, and then that statistic is released by Department of Statistics of Malaysia. It's in the Labour Force Survey. It follows the International Labour Organization's framework, and it's reliable across the years. I would think that that's the most reliable source of data in Malaysia. And then we actually have seen that self-employment or own account workers, these are the people who work for themselves and then they don't hire other people, whether it's traditionals or not traditionals. Well, we do not know that because we don't have the micro data. The trend has actually been rising in Malaysia. So to give you a comparison, in 2010, it's like 16.4%. And then in 2019, it's 18.1%. And then if we look at the trends, right, even though it's actually declining, and then for Malaysia, it has actually increased in 2010 and above. And then for other countries, it has either increased slightly or flattened. So we can actually observe this around the globe as well. I mean, like if you're interested, if the listener are interested, you can go check it out under World Bank global data. And then interestingly for Malaysia's, most of the changes happen among women, women workforce. So they have actually increased in terms of share, and also the young ones. Obviously own account workers, large majority are actually much seasoned people who are, you know, manager, consultants. They make up the huge chunk of the share, but we have seen growth, like a very big growth among the young cohort. So that's the data that we have in terms of you know, potential gig workers. And then from the social protection issues, from the social protection sides, the retirement fund that we have right now, which is Employee Provident Fund, EPF, the number of like contributing firm and contributing members have actually declined. The same goes to SOCSO, which is employment insurance scheme, right, in Malaysia. This kind of number actually give an indication that the employer-employee relationship has actually weakened somewhat in recent years. So those are, you know, statistics numbers and also administrative numbers. In terms of survey findings, which are not nationally representative, we have a 2019 Zurich and University of Oxford study that actually survey about 1,000 plus Malaysians. And then they found that 38% of Malaysian respondents who are currently having full-time jobs said that they have plans to leave their jobs in the next years to become freelancer, which is higher than the global average of 20%. And then we also have like the 2017 you know, university surveys conducted by universities that ask like full-time freelancers whether they are doing this because of their own personal choice or out of choice. And the majority of them said that, you know, this is because of my own choice. And also like from Khazanah Research Institute, the survey that we conducted over 20,000 young respondents in Malaysia 2018, I encourage people to check this out. They say that over 60% said that the internet will generate more jobs opportunities. So there's actually a very, very positive outlook in terms of, you know, the future of works you are willing. Having said that, okay, here are the worrying trends that I've seen. So the 2019 Zurich University of Oxford studies, right, they found that a lot of people are thinking of becoming freelancers. And then when they asked about their knowledge on insurance and then income protections, about 37% of self-employed said that, yes, I do have that information. But when they asked them whether they have that protection, only 18% said that they have any protections. And then again, this you know, difference between like knowledge and also actually doing it, the gap, right? Again, like I mentioned, that actually translate to the very low take-up rate for the voluntary self-employment schemes that's being offered right now. And that's actually worrying because like the 2014 Global Financial Literacy Survey for Malaysia shows that many of our populations, that only 36% actually, you know about, you know, compounding interest, inflation, as versus or 56%, and even Sri Lanka, we are comparable to Sri Lanka, 35%. So again, like even though this is financial literacy, right, but knowledge and actually doing it, and then what for if you are working full time, there's automatic enrollment into this kind of social protection scheme that is supposed to support you during, you know, in retirement, or if anything happened to you when you're working. We enjoy that, at least for me, right? I'm a full-time worker. I have that. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to make a decision. I'm automatically enrolled. But is it, you know, for some people, they might not be able to make monthly contributions because of, you know, their income is not, for example, over 6 months, or they cannot make that commitment? Or is it because of they are not earning enough because of the cost of living? Or is it human nature? So that is something to highlight. And during the pandemic, during the movement control order in Malaysia, Department of Statistics Malaysia actually rolled out an online survey to, you know, to gauge what is the impact of COVID on livelihood. And I don't think it's it's not surprising that self-employed, like, are the most vulnerable groups. A higher portion of them, 46% of them actually reported that they lost job, maybe because of the nature of the jobs. Maybe in Malaysia, right, the jobs that they do require them to be there in person, and when government asks them to stay at home, they are not able to do that online, right? This idea of working from home is actually a rather privileged view or privileged position to be in, because like another colleague of mine, she wrote a paper on working from home where she estimates that for Malaysia, the workforce that's actually able to work from home is only 30%, 30. So again, it's like there are different risks for different group of people. As somebody's doing research on it, there are benefits for those who are able to who have the skills, but there are also like a lot of risks for those who, you know, for certain for other groups.
Thank you. Good stats there. There's a lot of stats. I didn't get to get them all, but yeah, I think those are useful information that we need to know in Malaysia. Now, we talked about how it could be risky for some, it could be beneficial for some, and some people know the risks but still are willing to go into it because of the freedom of time and to choose who they work with. And some probably are still thinking whether this is for them or not. Now, from the employer's point of view, this is an alternative right now. Because this current pandemic has shown us that probably we're a bit too bloated in terms of being a company, and perhaps employing contractors is the way to go, and to be slightly leaner and meaner, they say. From a company's point of view, because of this pandemic, is there a benefit into going to this gig economy? Will that affect your productivity or the quality of your services and your products, because you don't have in-house talents that you can control full time and you can tell them what to do all the time because you're employing someone who's on contract? Any ideas on this, Marian, perhaps in your experience?
You know, a radio just went on. Can you hear that?
We can't hear.
Good. Okay. I don't worry about it. I think the challenge for companies is to recognize that there is work that is more appropriate for bringing the contractors in for. You know, you're not just replacing an employee. So creating deliverables-based projects and really projectizing all of the work. And more importantly, making sure that if you're bringing someone in to work with an internal team, that those independent workers, those freelancers, don't feel like second-class citizens. Because what makes, there have been a lot of studies, and I think Google was the one that really created the term of psychological safety, where for high-performance teams, people have to feel like they are really part of the team. And if you've got somebody saying, oh, they're not as good as we are because, you know, otherwise they would be hired, that's a problem. So to really ensure that that it's effective, you need that. You also need the kinds of things that Evan was saying about getting paid. You know, you have to pay your people. There are many different ways to structure engagements, and I'm sure that it's probably a little more complicated with governments and NGOs that he works with than some companies. But you know, it's one thing to pay an equipment supplier in 90 days. It's very different to pay a person in 90 days. So companies need to relook at their processes for onboarding, just like they onboard employees. They need to think about onboarding the freelance community and what would that mean to them. So it's, again, the feeling that they are equally talented and deserving to have this role, that they can get paid. It's not making the contracts too onerous. You know, some people would be asked to carry mega millions of dollars of liability insurance, which would be really hard for an independent worker. So, organizations need to rethink what they're doing and recognize that, just like, you know, employers want to be the employer of choice, companies are going to want to be the client of choice, because a lot of these consultants have choices. They don't have to go work for ABC Corporation, especially if they're not going to pay them in 90 days.
Yep, that's a good one as well. And I think as contractors, you should also be able to give them stars, like how we can give Uber drivers stars, and they can give us stars based on how we were as their clients
Right.
in the car. Yep. So that should work. That should work. I'm not sure if it's actually working right now for companies. Comfort. How about your experience working with companies right now? You're with ChemSign. Do you feel you're accepted in the team and you feel equally
Well,
talented as all the other full-time members?
well, my employment with this Malaysian company where I am now is sort of slightly different because that is my one leg into the non-gig economy. As I said before, what do you do when you do not have an employment? I don't like just to go around, and I don't like to file for unemployment or anything like that. So when I reached an age where I wanted to cut a little bit down on my constant traveling, then I found this Malaysian company to fill all my gaps. So it's basically a permanent employment, but with the right to take time off whenever I have some of these jobs that I used to feel that they were my main thing. Now I take less and less overseas. I mean, I'm older than your grandparents, most of you. Then this Malaysian company feels more and more of my life than before. But there have been four points that you have been mentioning that I'll just touch on. Marianne talked about the training, and she felt that in general the independent workers or consultants or whatever, they were spending more time or more effort on training. That depends, of course, a lot on the companies and also the country where we are. There are a lot of countries where it is part of the labor employment that you must spend so and so much of your turnover on training. That is not very effective if it exists in Malaysia. But my feeling is that the contract workers or the gig economy workers, they are people who want to be on their own. They want to have their own initiative. They are like people who sell things, and any shopkeeper will try to find a new thing to sell. And we are like that. I still, at the age of 73, I spent minimum 1 hour every evening on learning something new. Always to be in front. So I can teach all the young ones, saying that, well, try to see if you can catch me. But the training is important because that is what we sell all the time. If you are not improving yourself, there is no more job for you. Then you better find some nice quiet corner and sit permanent employment. Then you also mentioned the internet. I mean, the internet has really changed the way international consulting goes at the moment. Everything is on the net. Most of my jobs at the moment I get through LinkedIn. I have contact with about 350 companies that get my CV every 6 months. But among those companies are some that are just CV databases. So it all goes on the net. So we are headhunters. We are being headhunted more than we are applying for jobs. Then Marianne talked about this feeling of being part of a team. Now the jobs that I take internationally, they are slightly different from those that you are thinking of, because the jobs I take are teams that are created of only consultants, only freelancers. And very often our client, our hiring agent, is actually just a slave trader, just they have almost no professional knowledge about what we are going to do, but they can set together teams. And it is very important to find a team leader there who can create that team spirit that Marianne is talking about. If that does not exist, if that ability in the team leader does not exist, then the whole project will fail. But yes, I completely agree with you. If you don't feel sort of a natural loyalty or pleasure in being with the team, it doesn't function. Teamwork is great fun. So that is a very important part. And if you're independent consultants do not feel that they are part of the thing, like if they are not invited for your progress meetings or your staff meetings, then they don't work very well. Then you mentioned a little bit about the attitude of the companies or the development of the companies. There's something which we refer to as the institutional memory. If you fill up your company with people who just are there for a few months and they leave again, you have no institutional memory. Institutional memory is very much in your staff. So depending on what your company wants to do, where it wants to go, then you have to have a certain balance. There are some people that you take in short time to fix a certain problem. We go to the mechanic when there's something we can't do, and then we actually don't bother on how he did it. So it is not part of my own institutional memory how to repair an electronic car nowadays. My old tractor a long time ago I could repair, but there are things that we need to be able to do every day in the company. So there must be a weight on the number of people you have as permanent employees. That is your capital. That's your investment. They are the ones you train. And then there are those, the ambulance services or the specialist services that are not part of your institutional memory. The only thing you can do is you can advertise, oh, we have a roster of so many thousands of associated consultants, and we can always draw on their knowledge, but it's not part of your institutional memory.
That's very interesting. I think I read something about that as well. Well, it's sort of like a tribal knowledge that exists in your company. And it exists in there because of the people in your company. They've worked there for so long, and well, their own experience and the experience they had with the team. And that makes a difference. It's not just their experience personally in another company, but also experience with that team and with the clients that the company work with. And that's very, very valuable. And that's something that you probably can't get, well, you could get a bit of with contract workers, but not a lot of, and they'll need some time, as Marian said, to work as a team if all of them are contract workers, or if they join in your full-time employees to work with your team as a team itself. We have one question here. Someone just sent to me personally. If you could have three tips or three working tips for people who are considering going into this gig economy at any level, be it a graphic designer, be it a consultant or a driver, anything, what would those three tips be at the moment? We'll go into other questions later on, but this is something that's just a takeaway for some of them. Suraya, maybe you want to start on this one.
Oh, wow. Well, I do not have like a personal experience doing gig work, but last year, December, I actually have an intern coming in, and then because he has a family and then internships, you know that even though we actually pays quite a lot compared to other companies, they don't really, you know, pay that much as an intern. So he actually do rider jobs as a part-time. So again, if you're thinking maybe perhaps like you don't just put all eggs in one basket, it's like try it part-time first and then see, and also like build up savings. I know I feel like I'm sounding like a grandmother or something because I feel like there's 3 months at least of your living expenses that you need to, you know, build up, and then perhaps like be more strategic on whether you want to build a career or it's just as a temporary thing, and then know that there are always added costs to doing this gig work, because you have to absorb the costs of doing it as well. Because I know, like from the Oxford Internet Institutes, the number one type of skills that they want is actually software and development technology. So in that industry, so if you are in that, great. I mean, like, it's actually quite interesting, because like across nations, across the globe, right, the number one demand, at least according to that index, is actually in the IT industry, because how easy, how it is a high paced environment. So more strategic in that term, and then also leverage on the incentive that the government is giving in one of the latest policy documents, to generate more economic activity post the movement restriction order. We know we have like actually free online courses through ministry MDEX, right? For Coursera, for if you and then we also have like a Glow platform, which is a global labor online workforce, that where they can actually help you train you if you want to tap into the global markets. So we all have this kind of incentive. Like try to make full use of it. And also, yes, please sign up for retirement savings, and also related insurance, because it's really really cheap. It's 160. I'm not selling insurance, but I think like it's really really important, because like nobody's going to save you. You have to save yourself. So there you go.
And Marian, you've worked in this, and you've also hired people in the gig economy. So what would your recommendation for people who would want to go into that or to improve themselves as a gig worker?
Well, it would be a little different for the on-demand folks, because you can sign up for platforms and get your delivery jobs, etc. But if you're in the sort of the professional sector, if you will, or personal services, you want to become an independent event planner or whatever it is, there is an aspect of how do you feel about sales? A lot of people don't like to do sales. And the truth of the matter is you are selling all the time. You're networking with people. And yes, you may be able to get some jobs from, Upwork or Fiverr or another platform. But the truth of the matter is you need to do that business development piece. And how do you feel about that? It's not for everybody. There's also the business management piece, as Ivan pointed out, where, you've got to keep your books. You've got to have contracts. You've got to have marketing materials depending on your specialty. If you're a creative, you better have a website. So like there's overhead to that. You have to have your hosting fees, you have to keep it updated, all that kind of stuff. So you have to understand the business of running your business, and how some of that can be farmed out. There are great apps. There are great apps for tracking receipts. There are great apps for tracking time. Obviously accounting apps. There are contract apps. I mean, there is a whole ecosystem that is supporting people in how they work independently, collaboration apps, etc. But at some level, you have to do it. So you have to decide, until your practice is going so well that you can, pay an outside accountant, you have to send your invoices. So recognize what you're signing up for. And then finally, I think, again, and in the professional segment, you're running a company, you got to have your own brand. What is it that you stand for? How do you, I mean, it's you're creating the company of one. So you need all of those aspects that make a great company. You've got to be clear about the business you will do and the business you won't do. Because sometimes the business you won't do is just as defining for what you will do.
Wow, I think that's really, really, I think the last point, the business that you will do and the business that you won't do. So you need to make a decision what you choose not to do, because that's just as important as what you will do. Because if you choose the wrong business to do, that may affect your own branding if you don't perform that well. And if it's a business of one, it's literally a lot of personal branding. So how do you brand yourself? Because you are the company right now, you are the brand. And I think Kofit mentioned about training yourself and upskilling yourself all the time. That's one thing. I'm just gonna really go quick into one question. This is a really interesting question by an anonymous attendee. How can a gig worker calculate their worth, or how do they quote to their customers? How do you decide how much you are worth, or your service is worth? Maybe with an example of that. Kofit, maybe you want to give an example. How do you even measure that?
Okay. In many ways, it's not quite fair the way our jobs are done, because most of the consultancies that I take, and I work, when I do all these international jobs, it's all in official development aid. That's all the projects I deal with. It's not sort of straight business that I go into. It is when a country receives aid from another country, or they receive aid from the UN or from the World Bank. That is that kind of work, that line I'm in. There, unfortunately, will be employed for a certain number of days. There are a certain number of working days that they allow. And that means that we negotiate a daily fee. And then your problem is to find out what is the rate. And there, different organizations have very different rates. There's a difference between getting a job that is eventually paid by the World Bank or by the European Union or by a bilateral government. And even their per diem rates and the way which days they pay, which day you get the per diems for. Do they pay you for your travel time? And sometimes it can take me 3 days to reach a place. But in most cases, I'm not paid for those 3 days. So that has to be built into the fee that I take for. And I have to deliver a certain product that is normally in the form of a kind of report. I deliver that, but I'm paid for that fixed number of days. If it takes me longer time, tough luck. If it takes me shorter time, then I just don't submit so fast. Right? But it is normally by time, not really by piece, but it is the way in the jobs that I take, they are all sort of daily paid.
So and of course I think there's a lot of jobs that are fixed. Well, if you're Uber or Grab driver, it's all fixed on the system itself. And for professional services or consultancy, I think that's when you have to look at the number of days or hours, or you have to do a bit of your own research on what is the market rate at the moment, and whether or not the company is actually following the market rate, or if their rate is lower. And if you really want that business, you may have to match their rate that they have, a budget that they have. Marian, do you have any experience on this?
Yeah, because I guess I advise people not to look at what is it that I'm worth, because it's really what is the work, what is the value of that piece of work, the value of that piece of work to the enterprise, but also the value of that piece of work to me. So if it's, a crunch, I need this in, 2 weeks, and you're going to be working flat out for 2 weeks straight, I would charge more because, of the urgency factor. If it's a situation where I get to learn a new skill that's going to make me more marketable, I would potentially charge less, because that's adding to because I want to add that skill. There are some people who have like annuity clients where, they just have a client and they, at one point, a consultant asked me, well, should I like raise my rate? And, because I've just been doing this with this guy for years. And it's sort of like, well, you could, but isn't it nice to have that that known income that you don't have to create every year. So do you really want to sort of rock the boat? So kind of there's value to having that annuity stream. So there are a lot of factors that go into pricing. But those are some that are worth thinking about.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think, yeah, sorry, Comfort, you wanted to add something.
A little bit back on the regulations. Remember, when you are an independent, then you are not covered by the ILO conventions. The ILO conventions are mostly on labor. That means that you do not have access to collective negotiations on your fees. You cannot refer to some labor union agreements. You are on your own. And even among your equals, you very rarely talk about the fee level. No one knows what I make, and I don't know what my friends make. So we don't talk directly. So it's basically experience shows how much is it worth to quarrel with the potential employer before we take the job. But I can tell you, the best negotiation I ever did took me 10 seconds to do. It was for a long-term project, that means 3 years. It was with a company I had not known before. I just said to them, I'm not in the mood to quarrel with anyone right now. If you give me what you know your budget has as maximum, and if you promise me that what you offer me is the maximum you can, then I promise you, I say yes. And actually, I got something like 15% higher than I had expected. So that was my best one.
Okay, so that's another trick that, you know, because there's a question for new freelancers or gig worker, how do they, well, they're looking for jobs right now, and how do they place themselves? How do they price themselves? And that could be a way, asking for a budget. And what Marion said, if it's something that you're just starting on, it could be a new skill, or you're just building up your experience or your CV, as you would say, and you should maybe charge slightly less so you get into the market.
But Marianne also talked about giving points. That was something. I don't drive Uber. I'm an old taxi driver myself, so I support taxi systems. But in the EU, in the European Union, there is a system now. So all the reports that we submit, they are sort of given points. And that is public knowledge. You can go in and see whether my reports were easily accepted or whether there was too much problem with them. And that is what the companies are looking at.
Okay. So they're sort of grading you as well based on the reports that you, okay. Yeah. And I think, Marion, you mentioned a few platforms that you can work with, like Upwork or Fiverr, that you can get jobs as a freelancer. And Comfort, you mentioned that you mostly get them on LinkedIn. Any other platforms that we can work with? Maybe in Malaysia, it's slightly different. I don't know, Suraya, do you know of any that you know, new freelancers can check out?
Definitely check out MDAC. They have e-Kasih and then e-Usahawan, and then this kind of, you know, I'm not too sure how they compare to the international pool, but it's there at your service. And they also, you know, provide fun if you're doing something interesting. Or that, you know, a lot of tech companies are considered as their, you know, child. There are a lot of incentive that they can provide. So definitely do check out MDAC. Yeah, everything is online.
Marion, any other platforms that freelancers can work on?
You know, a couple of the other ones more on the sort of the professional consulting side. Catalant is global. There's a big firm in Australia, which I believe also does work in Malaysia, called Expert 360. And again, that would be more sort of strategy consulting sorts of gigs. There is TopTal, which is they purport to have the top talent in tech and finance. They are global, and they do a lot of vetting on people,
Okay.
more so than some other places. So that would be, I think, for a lot of specialties, writers, creatives, people like that, they tend to be smaller platforms that are localized. So, people in those, I'm sure there's something.
Yeah. And I think Facebook and LinkedIn, it plays a huge role as well in this among your own circle and among your network of friends. And what you post on Facebook, hey guys, I'm looking for this job, blah, blah, blah. If you have anyone looking for a graphic designer, please let me know. I think those kind of things, they work in the beginning. And I think you can depend on your closest friends and family members to help promote you. Top Talent, Catalan, these are the companies that you mentioned in your book, and probably more and international and more on professional consultancy jobs that if some of our attendees are looking into that. Now, for companies or for individuals going into freelancing or into gig working, any new trends or any new skills that you need to have or something that you need to implement if you're going to this right now at this current stage? Any new developments that we should know about before diving into this? Marian, I think you can start on that.
Well, you do always have to understand the regulatory situation in wherever you are. And on the one hand, things may have slowed down because of the pandemic, but it always does seem to be a moving target. The other thing is, as I mentioned, the apps that can help you run your business. There are more and more of them all of the time. So sort of being upfront about what those are. For example, there's a new level of professional liability insurance where there's a platform to do that helps consultants, and now they'll even allow it to be per project. So it's a much more cost-effective way to go. I think understanding where companies are with the issue of remote work and the pandemic, it is another aspect, because quite frankly, a lot of independent consultants, maybe not the rookies, but the veterans, are used to operating in that mode, maybe more so than their own employees might be. So I have heard of people bringing folks in to sort of help their employees with some of those issues. So.
Okay. Comfort, any input from you if a younger person were to go up to you and say, hey, I want to be just like you. So what should they do first?
Build up CV. That's, I mean, your biggest possession, if you go into the kind of work that I've been doing, is your CV. Anything you do, you must ask yourself, can I use that on my CV? How do I express that? And you should remember that a CV is not a permanent thing. For every job you try to get, you have to rewrite your CV. If you are looking for a job in the mining industry, don't write too much about all the jobs you did in river quality. And vice versa. If you are looking for a team leader job, then make sure that you highlight all the team leader functions you had before. Whereas if you are not taking the team leader or looking for a team leader job, then don't say that you have been 36 times team leader, because they don't want to have 2 team leaders, right? So be a little bit smart. And then for the young ones, to get the first 2 lines on your CV is hard. Take anything you like. Be a volunteer. Be in anything that just shows something about you as a person. Many of you can take post as the UN volunteers. You should try to go into Google and find out about UN volunteers. They are for, I think, people from around 30 years old and newly graduates, to give them their first experience in, now I'm talking about the development world. So really think of how do you get your first references. That's so important.
All right. Soraya, do you have anything to add? Yep.
Yes, in terms of like the opportunities to build up your resumes, right? And then there's a mention of like UN volunteering opportunities. And then those kind of chances, opportunities require money. And then if you're young, I would definitely encourage you to actually approach your MPs, go to the office and then say that here are the things that I'm working on. Look at the labor market right now. And then I'm sure, you know, there will be opportunities. If you are a Muslim, then definitely go to your Zakat office. A lot of informations are not quite good at updating their website, but those are the avenues. And I would very encourage young Malaysians, I don't have to say this, but they are usually on Twitter. Yes, you can actually just tag the ministers. I'm not sure about the success rates, but make yourself known, at least for the positive side, and definitely leverage on that. Because, you know, like social media, we have seen that usually like that's the best campaign. You can make things happen by having a social media present.
Thanks. We're going a bit beyond time, and I think Marion, you're getting hungry. Your dinner's waiting for you, and we're waiting to go for lunch as well here. So I'm gonna stop right here. There's a lot more questions, but I think we can handle that offline. And for the attendees, if you have any other questions, you can just type them on the chat box, or just type them on our Facebook, and we can channel it to the speakers later on via email. Thank you so much for the really, really good input. I've got some good points for the gig economy in terms of a company hiring gig workers or going into this, and how can they melt that with the current business model that they have. And I think that's very useful, especially in this current situation where we're torn between having a lot of staff and being really good at producing our service and products, and having, you know, good cost overheads, and but not having, you know, good, well, the tribal knowledge that you have in your company. So I think these are some good points, as well as individuals going into the gig economy, going into this, you have to understand the risks. I think the most important point that I got was from Marion. How do you feel about sales? Because everything is about sales. Personal branding, how do you sell yourself? Because basically you're selling yourself, your brand, you are the business. So I think that's a big point for people thinking about going into this gig economy. Whatever you do, even if you're a driver, you're still selling yourself as a driver. And you do get your star rating and all that slightly easier as an Uber driver, but they still rate you. And so you still have to sell yourself while you're driving, talking to them and stuff like that. So thank you very much. And I thank all the speakers for spending your time here, and with the time difference and all that, the rest of us are all in Malaysia at the same time. Happy 4th of July, even though it's no longer 4th of July. Happy Independence Day to the US. And for the attendees, thank you for joining us, and thanks for all the questions that we had. See you again in 2 weeks. We're back to our 10 o'clock in the morning slot on every Tuesday. Obviously, it's Tuesday Talk Live. So I'll see you again in 2 weeks, and we'll have another host of speakers that we're going to feature in the next one, and we're going to announce that. So see you all, Mariam, Comfort, and Soraya. Thank you very much, and see you guys.
Thank you.
See ya.